My name is Chris Thompson, and the game Dance Dance Revolution changed my life, which is a phrase I never thought that I would say. And for those of you who are not familiar with Dance Dance Revolution, it is a game where you step on arrows on the ground that correspond with arrows on a screen to music, and it makes me look like I can dance for 2 to 3 minutes at a time. And anyone who has watched me dance understands that's quite the accomplishment. This was 2006. I was at an arcade with my dad and my friend Tessa, and I had just bought a camera that had the ability to shoot video, which is something that wasn't as common back then. And I asked Tessa to take a picture of us dancing, but instead, she takes a video clip that will go on to launch my career. Now, when I saw this video, how brilliant it was, I knew that my MySpace page needed to see this video. But back then, you didn't have the ability to upload video onto MySpace, so I found a private hosting site, put it over there, linked it to my MySpace page, got rave reviews, my top 8 loved it. But then I started getting comments. I started getting emails from this private hosting site. I got my first hater comment almost immediately. And in their defense, I am a bad dancer. But I was more concerned with how they were finding this video if it was private. Turns out this is not a private site. It's a very public social media. It's a 6-month-old website called YouTube. And I was at the beginning stages of what would go on to become a huge industry. Now, back then, there wasn't a name for what it is that I do, but now I am called an influencer, which is a title I reluctantly accept at times because there's a lot of negative stigma surrounding this term. I hear we are vapid and self-centered and disruptive, and there are examples of this, for sure. But as someone who's been there from the beginning, I really want to challenge this idea. And the main reason I want to challenge it is because when you ask elementary school age kids and middle school age kids about what they want to be when they grow up, the number one answer is now influencer. And we have the ability to shape the way that they will use their influence in the future with our current actions. So how do we do that? I think the first step is changing the definition of influencer. Usually when you ask someone, what is an influencer, they'll say something along the lines of someone with a large social media following who creates content on the internet. But what's the threshold? How many followers do you need to be considered an influencer? Is it 5,000? Is it 500,000? Is it 1 million? I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about the person who had the most influence over you in your life. And now I want you to ask yourself this question. How many social media followers did they have at the height of their influence over you? And if you're anything like me, you were thinking the exact same number. 0. You do not need a large, a small, any social media following to be an influencer. My parents are influencers, teachers, friends. And at the height of their influence over me, not one of them had social media. To me, influencer is much more a verb than a title. It is less, I am an influencer, and more, how do I use my influence? The follower count denotes nothing but how far your reach can go, not how you use it. This next section I lovingly call my 10-year overnight success story. A lot of people see top content creators, but they don't know how much work goes into getting to that level. And to give you guys an idea of exactly how early on in the game I was, when I started on YouTube, you needed about 10,000 subscribers to be in the top 100 most subscribed of the entire website. And now that number is 27 million. So the game has expanded quite a bit. My first lesson was in failure. And not regular failure. It's public failure. You could put your heart and soul into a piece of content and it flops right in front of everybody. And it hurts. It still hurts to this day. But I started to look at it as a process of growth instead of a failure on my part, like the end of the road for me. The next lesson I had was in perseverance and patience. Perseverance and patience in the fact that when I first started on YouTube, I didn't even know how to transfer footage from a camera to a computer. And then within 3 or 4 years, I was producing full-length music videos. But there was a lengthy process for that. I remember this video that I was just showing. Essentially, I wanted to edit a video and I didn't know how, and I locked myself in a room for 12 hours until I finished that video, but I got it done. Also perseverance in the fact that there's a lot of changes that happen that are so out of your control. Changes of algorithm, disappearance of platforms. Me personally, I was homeless twice in the pursuit of being a full-time content creator. I was broke way more than I was successful, but I loved what I was doing. You have to have the love to make it. As long as I had a roof over my head and food in my belly, I was good. And that love is what's going to lead you to your why, your purpose for posting. That's what you launch your career off of. And I would discover my why in 2008. A proposition passed in California taking the rights away from LGBTQ+ people to be able to marry. And I knew there was going to be some sort of gathering of people, and I figured I'd just grab my camera and see if I could get some footage. And when I showed up, there was maybe a few dozen people, and they were upset, and there were some speakers. But pretty soon, that few dozen people turned into thousands of people. Those speeches turned into marches down some of the largest streets in Los Angeles. Helicopters above us, riot police surrounding us, filling the square in front of the CNN building, demanding attention for what had just happened. And for the first time, instead of turning the camera to myself and saying how I felt about it, I turned the camera to them. And then when I uploaded their story, I watched how it elevated their voices and educated people and created civil discourse. You guys remember civil discourse? Those were the days. I saw that my purpose was to use this big, beautiful platform that I had to elevate and motivate other people. And that is something that I have done for the rest of my career. And it didn't always lead to the biggest numbers, but it created impact. And I prioritize impact over numbers any day of the week. But none of this matters. And I mean none of this without this final element, and that's authenticity, which is admittedly a word that people throw around maybe a little too much, so let me break down exactly what I mean by authentic. You have to authentically love and believe in what you post, or if you have any success at all, it will be short-lived. Let's compare it to dating. You first start dating someone, you put your best foot forward, you smile a lot more, you probably ignore some things that would normally annoy you because you want to get into a relationship with that person. Then the honeymoon phase kind of fades out. Things start getting a little bit more real, and you start to see a lot of tension in your relationship, or the relationship ends altogether. And the reason is the person who had invested in you now no longer recognizes the person that they invested in. Who is this person? And that is the relationship that you'll have with your audience, so keep it real. Now, someone who I really look up to when it comes to authenticity is Brené Brown. Oh, I love Brené Brown. She's an author, she's a professor, she studies shame and vulnerability, and she was always successful. I discovered her, like a lot of people did, through her TED Talk. And I know exactly why her TED Talk was so successful. It's because she took a risk. She started sharing stories about herself that maybe didn't put her in the best light. but it humanized her. It gave people someone to connect to, and we are all in the business of human connection. We all live in fear of speaking our truth out loud. Even me right now. I'm nervous how you're going to judge what I'm saying, but I have to lean into that fear so that the people who are listening feel less alone in a world where that is so needed. Connection. I'll leave you guys with the proudest achievement of my career. I was in Chicago visiting my family, and I had a viewer of mine who I'd known for a long time who was passing through Chicago, and he said, "Hey, let's meet up." And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Let's get pizza." And I said, "Yes." And by the way, if you're ever trying to seduce me into a conversation, pizza is a really good start, especially Lou Malnati's pizza. It's the best pizza, don't at me. He asked me if I remembered a video called "There's Nothing Wrong with You." And I didn't remember this video because I made a video every single day for 6 years. And some of these videos were pretty much just to keep the streak alive, and this was an example of that. One take to my iPhone, no editing, poor lighting, but I still wanted to make sure that I was putting out a good message. There's nothing wrong with you. He told me that was the first video of mine that he had ever seen. I was like, cool. Then he said he was in a hotel room when he saw it. I was like, okay. Then he told me he was in the bathroom when he watched it. I was like, TMI. He had his clothes laid out. He had notes written to his loved ones. And he was in the final moments of a 6-month plan to end his life. And somehow, in that moment, he found my video. And the title alone spoke to him. And in that moment, he decided he wanted to live. His life is my proudest achievement. He is now engaged. He just moved into a beautiful new house. He's got a great job. I get to officiate his wedding next year, which is a humongous honor. But because I took my influence seriously, he lives. And that's the whole point. Everybody who's watching right now, you are all influencers. Does not matter how many followers you have. Your words have power. Use that power for good. Put good messages out into the world. You never know at what moment in somebody's life they're going to need that message. Thank you.